The movie opens up with a distress cry for help. We can see Mr. Jacob King talking to the local authorities. They inquire about his stay in Los Angeles and advise him that he will need to work to gain extra cash as he was only with $600. Jacob assures the authorities that he didn't come to stay and he can manage up his money before he departs from the country. Jacob goes over to rent a room where he will hold up temporarily as he plans to go meet his sister. The next day he goes over to his sister, Bianca's apartment. After banging the food severally without reply, he is met by Bianca's neighbor, Trish. She tells Jacob that Bianca used to live next door but she left and she doesn't know about her whereabouts, because Bianca left no address. Jacob asks about Alex, Bianca's husband. Trish tells him about how Alex got into an argument and he left Bianca with his son a long time ago. Trish learns that Jacob is worried about his sister and that is the sole reason for his visitation. She invites him for dinner later that night as he goes to meet the landlord that his sister pays rent to. The landlord tells Jacob that Alex was always late on payment but a young man named Zico helped Bianca clear all her debts. She chips in saying Bianca wasn't looking great when she left the house. A worried Jacob then goes over to look for this man named Zico. Maybe he might give him a clue on where to look for his sister. He meets up with some group of men at a car wash where he feels Zico resides. He asks to meet Zico but the men tells him that there is no one called Zico amongst them and they couldn't help him. A suspicious Jacob then goes back to his apartment as he searches through what was left of Bianca. As he goes through her pictures he reminisces on his memories with Bianca. Something else catches his attention. He sees a photograph of Bianca with a white man who he felt might be Zico. The face looks familiar like that of the one he saw at the car wash. He also sees bookmarks of locations that she could have gone to. So he goes to visit a supermarket in search for her. At first he couldn't get any positive answer, but later on he was told to visit the morgue. With so much to lose, Jacob goes to the morgue in search of his sister. There and behold he sees her body lying helplessly. Her face had been battered brutally and it was an obvious sign of murder. He lies to the attendant that it isn't his sister as he leaves. As soon as he walks out the building, he breaks down in tears. An angry Jacob then goes over to the hardware store. He buys a whip as he proceeds to the car wash where Zico stays. With so much anger in him, he beats up Zico's men, picks Zico him and then almost strangles him to death. After mutilating his face he pours acid on Zico telling him that he should tell whoever he works for that this is a message from the king. He picks up his phone as he leaves. He goes through his phone and sees his recently contacted connected to a profile, Duke. A tense Jacob then goes over to Trisha's party. He meets up with Trisha who noticed how tensed up he was. She decides to ease his tension by seducing him and offering him coke. Jacob asked if this what Bianca did. Through their conversation he learns that Bianca was connected to a dealer named Frankie. So he takes Trisha's phone and then sends a message to Frankie, telling him that they need drugs at the party. When Frankie arrives, Jacob goes over to confront him. He calls him a dealer and asks him if he knew anything about his sister. A nervous Frankie becomes uncomfortable and then leaves the party, but Jacob follows him up to his car, where he beats him up properly. He takes his drugs and then demands information from him. Jacob then figures out that he was working for a man called Duke. Back at his apartment, he meets up with a woman who he had saw earlier hooking up with a man. She introduced herself as Kelly, telling him how messed up the place was. She goes on to tell him that she has to do what she does to put a roof over her head. She noticed that he was searching for a woman, so she chips in a little bit of advice for him on how to search for people in Los Angeles. Before she leaves, Jacob hands her over a bracelet which he says will fit her daughter perfectly. The next morning he rents Kelly's car as he goes to meet Patricia. He demands more information from her, but unfortunately Patricia knew nothing about Bianca, other than she was scared the last time they saw. Jacob then tells Tricia that he found Bianca's body in a morgue with her feet cut out and her teeth and face battered brutally. Tricia begins to cry as she cared about Bianca. With the help of a complimentary card, Jacob decides to pay a visit to Dr. Paul Wentworth. There he finds the man that had beaten up walking with two other men. He picks up the phone he had hijacked and dialed Duke's number. Just as he predicted, one of the men picks up the phone, and then identifies as Duke. Jacob goes to the dentist under the guise of a referral from his sister and he meets the connected Dr. Wentworth, who tells him that Bianca was being pimped out to pay her husband's debts and that she often disappeared. He inquired more about his sister, but the dentist claims he doesn't know much about her. He tells Jacob that they met at a party, saying although he knows Bianca's husband Alex owed money to the wrong guys. His money troubles made him leave and Bianca started doing things she ought not to do. He assures Jacob that he doesn't know about her whereabouts and he was doing well with his job, so he wouldn't want to compromise that. After an unfruitful conversation with him, the dentist leaves. Jacob follows suit as he doesn't fully trust the dentist. He tails him till he got to a place where he meets up with a man named Frank Leary. Frank is running a campaign for office and doesn't want to be seen with Wentworth. So Wentworth quickly asks for a favor. He needs 2 hitmen to take care of a job for him and make his problem disappear. After they all agreed on price, Wentworth goes over to meet one of his clients named Mike at Beverly Hills. King follows Wentworth to the home of a wealthy Hollywood producer, Mike Preston, whom Wentworth shakes down for $100,000 to cover the cost of the hitman, and another $750,000 of blackmail money due to his involvement with Bianca's death. He tells Mike about the Bianca problem and how her brother was in town looking for her. He warns Mike that he would be a serious problem, and they needed to pay him off heavily. Mike isn't willing to pay that much, so Wentworth suggests that they take him out for good to solve their problem. He hands him over $100,000 in cash, saying he doesn't want this problem to bring down everything he has worked for. Meanwhile, Jacob had followed the dentist inside the mansion. He scouted the place and even sees his sister's stepson, Armand, in the pool area. While Paul Wentworth was leaving, he noticed Jacob's car parked at the side of the road, so he puts out a call for Jacob to be executed. On his way back home, Jacob is stopped by 2 cops who asked for his license plate and then aggressively arrests him. While stuck in traffic, Jacob realizes that this man weren't police officers and he has been kidnapped, so he screams for help. In an attempt to make him calm down, Jacob escapes. But the men follows him up and then pins him to the floor, beating him mercilessly. While one of them goes to bring the car, the other is distracted by a truck driver, which makes them lose track of Jacob for the second time. Instead of receiving the backlash, they decide to lie that Jacob had been taken care of. Later that night, Kelly finds Jacob beaten up, so she takes him up to her room, where she treats up his wound. While unconscious, Jacob began having flashbacks of memories between him and Bianca. The next morning, Paul Wentworth calls Mike to tell him that Jacob would no longer be a problem as he had been taken care of. He also blackmails Mike for $750,000, saying it was for all the troubles. While recovering, Jacob tells Kelly about his family and his younger brother Isaac. Isaac had joined a notorious gang named Number 1 back in Cape Town. Unfortunately, he didn't make it. This was what made Bianca leave South Africa for Los Angeles. She had blamed Jacob for Isaac's death, saying he wasn't there for him. He also blames himself for Bianca's death, and that is why he must avenge her. In the next scene, we can see Wentworth taking to Duke and his men. He tells them that Jacob is dead and would no longer be a problem. But Duke had combed the morgue but didn't find any black man there last night. He is worried that Wentworth wasn't sure of what he was doing. Wentworth assures him that everything has been taken care of and he shouldn't worry about anything. Meanwhile, Jacob finds an encrypted memory disk in Bianca's belonging hidden in a cigarette pack and heads over to the store to listen to it. Unfortunately, he is only able to listen to snippets of the audio but comprehends that Preston is the target. After he had recovered from his beating, he builds a bomb out of materials from a hardware store, and plants the bomb in a bag with money and the drugs he took from Frankie. He prepares himself for battle as he needs to avenge the death of his sister. On the other hand, Duke's men finds out that the car Jacob used that night belongs to Kelly and it wasn't reported stolen. Jacob heads over to Mike's mansion. Mike was having an alone time with Armand, who was busy on his video game. He sneaks into Preston's home. After putting out a phone call and revealing his identity, he forces him to meet him inside his office to decrypt the file, which reveals camera footage of Preston engaging in acts of pedophilia on Armand during a party. The footage also uncovers Leary engaging in sexual acts with Bianca during an orgy. Preston confesses that Bianca's husband had gotten into serious debts, and his debtors coerced Bianca to take in drugs and pimped her out to pay them back. They killed her husband in the process but continued to pimp her out. With nowhere else to source for money, she sold her stepson to Preston for money. When she realized that he was committing pedophilia acts on Armand, she stole the footage and then called King for help. Preston tries to trick Jacob, but he was smart enough and then overpowers him. He ties him up and his office assistant. He lures Wentworth and Duke to the mansion, where he silently kills Preston. He leaves the bag of money with the bomb planted in it for Wentworth. Before he leaves, he tries to rescue Armand before Wentworth arrives. Wentworth kills Preston's office assistant by piercing a sword in his throat. He picks up the bag of money as he leaves. Just as he was about leaving, Duke and his men arrives. Wentworth swears that he was going to split money with Duke. One of his men goes after Jacob, but he wasn't any match for him. Jacob kills him and escapes the mansion with Armand. Meanwhile, while Duke and Wentworth were going through the money, the bomb triggers, killing the both of them. Jacob takes Armand back to Kelly's motel. He is hell-bent on rescuing his sister's stepson, but the sole surviving member of the gang, Zico, ambushes him in the room. He beats up Jacob. During the heated moment, the boy escapes. Luckily for Jacob, Kelly rescues him by hitting Zico. This gives Jacob a chance to finish him up for good this time around. King chases Armand but then gives up. He then proceeds to drop Kelly and her daughter at the bus stop where she will return back to her hometown in New Mexico. He hands her a bag of money which he took from Preston's mansion earlier. As he begins walking away, Leary's campaign posters can be seen on the walls of the city of Los Angeles. Meanwhile, Jacob returns to South Africa, where he is welcomed back and is revealed to be a detective with his local police. The end. If you love this video, please leave a like and subscribe for more. Goodbye till we meet again.